So it's not for kids.
Kenny, have you redeemed your micro badge coupons for this year?
You know it. A cheese aficionado, and I hate Yummy Monster Tummy.
Yummy Monster Tummy hater badge? That's what they... So for those who don't know, you go on Board Game Geek, they have all these micro badges you can get, which if you haven't been around long enough to know about the old internet days when everything was web forums, micro badges are the fucking best. I love those little things. Yeah. They're just like...
I've never played Yummy Monster Tummy, so I just know someone in the group really likes it, so...
I played it a little bit, actually. It's okay.
Okay, new game alert, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, it's a remake of a game called Soviet Kitchen.
Really?
Yeah, and the original theme was like, I don't know how I feel about it.
Like, it was Soviet Kitchen. Like, did it make it out like Soviets are just like starving to death?
Yeah, pretty much. Or, you know, they're just working real awful stuff into their food.
Low-key propaganda?
Yeah, it's not comical. You know, it's
right. It's like people really had to eat this stuff. Like, it's not like, oh ho, this is funny. I'm glad they rebranded.
Now it's Yummy Monster Tummy.
Yeah, it's one of those like ARG games. Like, it's not
what
augmented reality game.
Okay. Oh,
if you're scanning QR, if you're pointing a phone,
hold on.
Okay,
I get what you're saying, but that's not what ARG stands for.
Wait, what?
ARG stands for alternate reality game. Like, you know, like Cloverfield.
All this time, I thought it was augmented reality.
I was like, is there an ARG associated with Yummy Monster Tummy? Because that's insane.
Oh my god, the description on Wikipedia is like sending me. An alternate reality game is an interactive networked narrative that uses the real world as a platform and employs transmedia storytelling to deliver a story that may be altered by players' ideas or actions. So, or is that like fucking Pokemon Go?
No, Tom. It's like Cloverfield. It's like, hey, this is real, but it's actually an advertisement for the movie that's coming out or something like that.
Does Pokemon Go not like apply to this, or is...
Why would Pokemon Go be like...
Because the real world is the platform, and then transmedia storytelling. I guess like this, there's not a story per se.
Yeah, there's no story. No, like District 9 did this as well. Like a lot of found footage films are associated with...
Oh, okay. I'm tracking. I had no idea. Yeah, that's what that was. Okay.
At the peak of the ARG stuff, there was one called Aladigma, and it was like very involved and interesting, and people were like trying to solve it and everything.
Aladigma nuts.
But yeah, it turns out it was just like some kid, and it had like no association to an actual piece of media that was coming out. It was just like some kid doing it for fun. That's
incredible. I mean, it's amazing, like, what's possible, I suppose. It's like an inspiring true story. Someone should make a documentary about it.
They should. It's called Follow the Blank Spaces. And it had this interesting thing where you had like a black page, but when you hit Control A, it showed a bunch of basically space bar marks that were links to different information and facts and things like that felt like they were associated with something, but apparently not.
Fascinating. You know what? Now that you're describing it, I do know what this kind of thing is. I didn't realize, I guess, that Cloverfield made an entire like marketing.
That was huge. That's the thing I associate it with the most.
I like vaguely remember it.
Well, it's also like there was this whole puzzle online trying to parse through like these photographs and the backs of the photographs to understand the origins of the monster and like the companies associated with the movie that like ended up having their own fake company websites and everything. Like there was like a lot of buzz around all this stuff.
History.
Well,
it completely hijacks my open. That's fine.
What was yours about? The badges?
I was talking about micro badges. Yeah,
oh, yeah. So anyway, micro badges.
No, we're good. We got content. Welcome to Shelf Stable. You're supposed to do it.
Welcome to Shelf Stable. I'm your host, Tom Bowers.
And I'm your other host, Kenny Katayama.
Yeah, we're doing a podcast celebrating board games that have stood the test of time. What are we talking about, Tom?
This week's topic, Carl Chudyk. Where did he come from? What does he want? What is he going to do next? But before we talk about that, let's talk about some of the things we've been playing recently.
Yeah, Tom, we finally got him back on the cast. The great Dr. Reiner Knizia.
Yee.
This is Risk Express from 2006, publisher Hasbro. Now you might be thinking, wait a minute, Kenny. Risk Express, Monopoly Deal, mass market tier list. Is this all you bozos talk about nowadays? Is mass market games? Well, let me tell you, Risk Express goes for $1,000 on Board Game Geek. So it's not your ordinary Risk game. And you know that money directly equates to the value of games, which we'll be talking about quality later on today in the Carl Chudyk section. So yeah, as I was rolling my cubes of gold, I just couldn't help but think this game must be good. I've really enjoyed this, and it helps that I won. I'm definitely not a I won, so I like this game kind of person, but like, I don't know. I felt validated because I had certain theories about how the game worked, and I ended up doing a lot better than everyone else at the table. Mr. Tom Bowers right here the whole time was like, Kenny, you're just a big dum-dum. You don't know what you're talking about. You haven't played this yet. We've already played it. Stop talking like you know what's going on. Stop being so self-righteous and confident. And I wrecked that fool, okay? That fool had 0 points by the end of the game.
I had 3, I think. I had West Africa.
Okay.
So what was funny about that is you just rolled into this and you just like full confidence. You're like, I understand the heuristics perfectly. And it just pissed me off because it's like, bro's playing this for the first time. I understand that you, as far as we can tell from one play of it, had a good assessment of what you should do in this game. But I think like the attitude was just tilted me.
Yeah, I will concede the attitude was indignant. But to me, it was just like so apparent that y'all were like playing this wrong, and I'm just like I know
that's exactly the problem, Kenny. You can't just be like, oh, you guys are doing this wrong. Let me show you how it works.
Yeah.
First, I roll the dice. Then I select the most appropriate disc for the dice to go on. Yeah, no shit, Kenny.
Okay, maybe we'll explain it to the audience. So in classic Reiner fashion, he's able to do a lot with a little. There's not a lot of rules here. You have these different discs that represents parts of the world that you can colonize, I guess. It's Risk. And then you roll dice and you try to match the dice symbols to the different requirements on the card. There's like multiple rows of symbols that you need. All the dice are uniform, and you know they have higher chances of certain symbols over others. And you're just fundamentally trying to see if every roll you can get one of the rows completed. If you miss on a particular roll, you can roll again, but you just lose an extra die. So you're losing a die each time. And so you're just calculating like, how likely is it for me to take over this whole area? But yeah, if you meet the requirements, you take that particular card in front of you. And then the other thing you can do is you can try to take over an existing card that somebody has already taken over, but you have one additional requirement. I think it's like one extra symbol. That symbol, it doesn't feel like it's a lot, but it is a lot because it's a 1 in 6 chance, and it's another commitment that you have to do. It's basically another row. So the final conceit or the final gimmick is that if you collect all of one continent, you secure it, which means you flip it over. You get a little bit more points, and you guarantee that nobody can take that over by doing that additional symbol anymore. But that's the general game. And now we come back to my indignant behavior. these fools, they were playing the game like, oh yeah, I'm going to take this away from this person because then they're not going to win. And then, oh, I'm going to go for this one because then I could have a full set. I think that's a trap. So the whole flipping things over, that's a thing you do when it works, like when it happens to be in your favor. But it's a dice game. It's a game where you have to analyze the likelihood of things happening. If there's two symbols that only show up like 1 and 6, and you happen to roll those two symbols in your first roll, you start going for that particular card because you're going to be most likely to get it, or, you know, get the most value out of your rolls. You don't do the opposite, which is say, I'm going to try to get this specific card, roll your first hand, have nothing that matches it, and be like, oh, well, I'm going to re-roll, you know? Like, that's not the way to do it. So that was the only thing I was doing different from everyone else around the table. The theory around it was solid, and it ended up playing out. But yeah, my delivery was bad for sure.
I mean, you just came in full confidence, and you know what? Your strategy worked. So, you know, we all have something to learn, I suppose. I'm curious, I guess, to play this. This is one that it's light and quick enough. You could play it like a bunch of times. And I wonder if the strategies evolve at all, or if it never gets more interesting. Yeah,
I don't know. That being said, like, I'm perfectly okay with that, it being like this and that's it kind of thing. Like, I would be happy to play it again in its current form.
For sure. I'm trying to position exactly how I feel about it. Because, like, it does the thing that, like, Can't Stop does that I like. And a lot of these other, like, Push Your Luck. Have you ever played, like, Farkle? Where, you know, everyone's gathered around the table watching you roll something. And then they're, like, rooting for you, rooting against you. And then you roll it and you get it. And it's like, woo! Or you don't get it and everyone's like, oh, you know. Yeah. It's fun for that. But it's also, like, it's not a particularly engaging mental exercise, I think.
I think Can't Stop is a more interesting game.
The real question, Kenny, is where are you putting this on the tier list from last week?
It's probably an A.
Are you picking this over Yahtzee?
Yeah, I'm picking it over Yahtzee. I think it feels more thematic and interesting than Yahtzee. I would play this over Scrabble or Taboo, but that's a personal thing. What about you?
I think, yeah, it's interesting. My own question. I'm like, I think it depends on mood. Yeah. Like, sometimes I could go for a Scrabble. I feel like I've appreciated what you said more since last week's recording, that it's more of an area control-ish, like, that there's just like there's a puzzle to the scoring of Scrabble more than the words of Scrabble.
Yeah.
It's just annoying to me. You know what they need to invent is like something between Quirkle and Scrabble. Because Quirkle's okay, but it doesn't have like the board the way Scrabble does.
Crabble.
Crabble. Quabble.
Quabble.
It's like Elmer, they put like Elmer Fudd on the box, just like, Quabble, it's my very own game.
That was your Elmer Fudd.
Like, I don't fucking know.
You said the word very and you used the regular R.
Oh, right. Fuck yeah.
Risk Express from 2006.
Whisk Express. Oh, Kenny, you know, we're going to stay on the mass market train because I got a doozy for you. It's, I'm talking about Blockbuster. It's just called Blockbuster, apparently. If you look at the box, it says Blockbuster, the party game, in a little sticker. This is from 2019. Someone made this, and it's published by a group called Big Potato Games. I got to play this one very randomly. My brother is leaving, or he's moving away at the last minute. I was invited to a kind of a going away party, and his roommate had this game. As you can probably guess, it is a movie trivia game. I feel like this is a good implementation of trivia, and I think you might appreciate this as well, Kenny. So the first thing that they did right is that all the cards are some of the most well-known movies ever. There's no movies where you have to like dig deep. If you're a movie person, you probably have heard these movies. I'm not talking about like, you know, Scarface, Goonies, It. Those are just some of the ones that come to mind. Babe was on there. What they did is they basically merged movie trivia with monikers. So each team has like a sort of head-to-head event where you're given a category. It'll be something like name movies that take place in New York. And then it's just like back and forth, just like Annie Hall, something else. I don't know, fucking Cloverfield, blah, blah, blah. It's like back and forth, back and forth. You're just trying to run the opponent at a time. So this works with a chess clock is how we did it.
List ARG games. Go.
Yeah, it's like you play like a sort of hot potato, which is like in a head-to-head, between two teams. Whoever wins the head-to-head competition draws 6 cards. And they get to pick which 3 they put on their side of the board, and they have to get their team to guess. And the other 3 cards are like the leftover that the other team gets to deal with and figure out. And so like none of the cards are that hard, but this is a pretty significant advantage. It's like the first interesting decision point, because what you're trying to do ultimately is collect 8 categories of movies on your team's side. And so you get this like I split, you choose-ish sort of situation. Actually, that could be another layer that you could add to this, is actually having the winner split the pile, and then the other team gets to choose which pile they want. That would be too much probably, but it's just already like it's a nice advantage for winning the head-to-head.
Then you add suits and ranks to each of the things listed, and then you do a trick-taking game.
Now I'm really into this. But the actual gameplay, you get the 3 movies have to go in one of 3 slots, and the board looks like a literal parking lot with the Blockbuster sign on it. I was really laughing because apparently they put the stickers for the Blockbuster sign upside down. So it really looked as derelict as a real-life Blockbuster. Like as if the sign started to fall, but was just like hanging on upside down. Anyway.
Blockbuster was a store where you got movies and you rented them out, and then you had to return them later. Just for context for folks.
Yeah, in case you're like 20 years old, you don't know what we're talking about. You used to have to get in your car, drive your ass to a physical store, walk inside, and hope to God that the last person that returned the movie did not fuck it up for you beyond repair, and pay $5 to hold this movie for only 7 days. And then you had to get that shit back, or you'd be owing them your life savings. It was a crazy time, Redbox isn't even relatable to people anymore. You ever seen those machines outside of a Walmart and walked right past, ignored it? I know no one uses those anymore either, but like if you've ever seen a Redbox, just imagine that, but it was this whole store, just a store that was a Redbox.
This is not the first time I've heard about this game. I've heard good things, yeah.
Yeah, I actually really liked this one.
Would you rather play this or Monikers moving forward?
I mean, I'd rather play Monikers because it's just so much more creative and fun. I really enjoy movie trivia. I'll say this. If you have a copy of Seen It and you miss what Seen It does, check out this one. That's the reason I'm bringing it up, really. It's sense. Like, this is a Seen It killer for me, personally.
I've always been searching for that Seen It killer. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Tom, for your service.
Yeah, you're welcome. Because what it does smart about it is that it has the very obvious movies that everyone ought to be able to guess with enough hints.
Yeah, Transformers.
Mm-hmm. But it gives you this head-to-head, and that's where you get to flex, like on all the obscura. You get to like name movies that fit the category, but no one else has maybe heard of,
Endgame.
Like Avengers Endgame. Exactly.
Like everyone knows Transformers.
Yeah.
That was Blockbuster from 2019. Oh. We're pulling up to the docks here, talking about import-export from 2017. This is designed by Jordan Draper of, you guessed it, Jordan Draper Games. I think it was also called Dark Flight at a certain time. Full disclaimer, this is a copy that we purchased ourselves, but in the interim of us purchasing it, Jordan Draper offered us a review copy. So we ended up not accepting the copy, but I don't know. Like, I just want to be transparent so that people aren't like, hey, you were... This is a game that is very akin to Glory to Rome. You lead with a certain card, and then people can use their matching cards to take the same action. They're multi-use cards. They can be used for the action and also for tucking underneath different sections. And every card has a crazy ability that gets unlocked when you export it. The area where this deviates from Glory to Rome is that you're basically building out these large container ships. And then once you've completed one, you bid on the containers inside of those ships. And you can also pirate them to go and reuse them. So it has a little bit of the game Container in it as well. A lot of people have described this game as Glory to Rome meets Container. I don't know, I haven't played Container, but this game is so similar to Glory to Rome, it is kind of insane. I would say if you're a big Carl Chudyk fan, you should definitely explore this one. But if you're just interested in Carl Chudyk, my big review here is it's probably not worth exploring this. It's different enough that I feel like, if you're hardcore into these, it's worth playing and even owning a copy. But I came out of it like, I just want to play Glory to Rome now. I just want to play Matai now. These multi-use, pure tucking games, they take a lot of table space. This one really takes the cake. And to a point where it's like kind of hard to tell what's going on the board. You're like, is this in your port or not? What is this? What is this card? And people are like, oh, I forgot. I don't know what that is. And then you just have a card that's like out there in the ocean, a container just bobbing in the ocean and nobody knows what it is.
We just got some detritus floating.
Also, the most different thing, which is the auction, feels a little fiddly and arbitrary sometimes. It might as well have said, like, take two things in the middle. Because every time people started bidding for things, they were, like, bidding way too much, in my opinion. It's like either people are not understanding the value of the bid, which is ultimately your points at the end of the game, or they're understanding it and it's a very clinical, sterile approach to bidding. It doesn't feel like an auction game almost. That might have just been our group though. The third thing is, like, one of the fun things about Glory to Rome is that you unlock these insane powers that feel like they completely change the game fundamentally. In import-export, it's much more minute. Yes, the powers are still very strong, but they feel reasonably tuned. Like, they feel like the powers you would unlock in an engine builder or tableau builder of standard ilk. And so as a result, there's not as much excitement when you complete something. Like, the game isn't turned on its head. For some folks, that's a welcome change. For me personally, I was just not as excited about each of the effects. I was a little bit disappointed when they would trigger. It sounds like I'm really not enjoying this game. I still had a lot of fun, but I like when it's so similar to a game that I absolutely love, but it doesn't exceed or meet that game on any of its grounds. I just am left thinking I'd still be interested in going back and exploring. And, we were talking about how you could play it in the future. So there's something there.
Interesting. So basically Chudyk without the Chuck.
How do you feel about crediting games? Along this conversation about games that are similar to Glory to Rome, La Granja explicitly thanks its inspirations in the rulebook, one of them being Carl Chudyk, and saying, like, a huge inspiration for this game was the tucking and multi-use cards of Glory to Rome. I would say La Granja is like way more different than Glory to Rome than Import-Export is to Glory to Rome. And Import-Export doesn't mention Carl Chudyk or Glory to Rome anywhere in the rulebook. I don't think it needs to, but I think it's in bad taste. And if I'm remembering correctly, the Kickstarters for Import-Export explicitly said, this game is like Glory to Rome meets Container. I think that's like where this premise comes from, and the designer has mentioned that, like, there's a video of Jordan Draper introducing the game to like a BGG interviewer, and he mentions Glory to Rome as well in the teach. Jordan Draper is very aware of the origins and source of the material for his game. I just wish he would have acknowledged that somewhere in the credits. It doesn't hurt. There's not it's not an additional cost or anything. So I guess for designers out there, quote your inspirations. It doesn't mean you copied the game. I'm not against the fact that design principles were reused. If anything, I welcome that. That's how you create the next big thing. But I do think it's important to acknowledge when it's so similar to the original material, what that inspiration was.
I mean, it's interesting you say that because, like, in a sense, that information is out there and you can find it. As in, like, Draper is, like, comparing it to Glory to Rome, and it's being credited in a way.
But it's not being credited. That's the problem. It's like it's acknowledged, but it's not there.
It's just not in the rules.
The rules, and it's like you credit things that are important to the creation of something.
It's a good point. You know, you might as well just throw it in there. Just like, and thanks to Carl Chudyk for being the super designer that you are, or something. I don't know. This game wouldn't exist without, you know, Glory to Rome, something like that. Well, that's Import Export 2017. All right, last one I want to talk about, Kenny, is Unlock Secret Adventures, a Noside story from 2018. It's designed by Vincent Goyat and published by Space Cowboys. Yeah, so this is a standalone escape room in a box. And this one is also a sequel to one of their other escape rooms. There's like a character in the story of this has a lot of allusions to whatever happened in the first one. You don't need to know what happened in the first one to understand this puzzle, I don't think. It stands on its own, and I was able to figure it out. If you haven't played an Unlock game before, and you don't know what an escape room is, I'm sorry to tell you, you're listening to the wrong podcast. You should really try out an escape room. They're a ton of fun.
I mean, understanding the shit that you say, like, half the time is basically an escape room, I feel like.
Yeah, exactly. You're already getting the experience right now. Basically, you go inside of a room, right? And there's some sort of story or theme.
Are you? No, I don't. Wait, hold on. No, XX. Yeah, people know. I'm vetoing this explanation. We have precious time.
If you don't know what an escape room is, I'm not going to explain it here. Yeah, just go find one in your local area and just try it out. It's trust us. This game, the Unlock series, notoriously perhaps requires an app to be able to run. What I didn't fully realize about it until playing it this time, and this is not the first Unlock that I've done, is things happen in the app that are like more important to actually solving the puzzle than I even realized. We were in the middle of a room and we solved one of the machines, and then the app just started like blasting us with this sound bite like every 2 minutes or less. And I was like, what? I couldn't make sense of what was even being said because I was so focused on like the cards and the puzzle in front of me on the table that the app was just annoying me. And I was like, shut the fuck up. And it probably didn't help that I was playing this with a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. They're just kind of like chaotic. I was maybe hungry, like not already like in the best mood. And I'm like really struggling with this puzzle and kind of getting mad at myself that I'm like asking for as many hints as I am. And so the app is just making some noise. And I was like, shut the fuck up. And like, I just closed the app. Well, it turns out whatever the noise the app was making was actually giving me the clue that I needed to understand how to input the answer to one of the machines.
Oops.
I didn't know this until because I was just like, how is anyone supposed to get to the next room? And on Board Game Geek, someone had the same problem that I did. They're like, how the fuck am I supposed to know what to put in this clock? And then someone's like, the app makes a sound. I was like, God damn. That was frustrating. The better parts of this game are when like you are sliding the cards around and it's like when you put two cards together in a certain way, like at a certain angle, something reveals itself. Like there's almost like an optical illusion that you have to look at the right way to get the answer. I like things like that in these escape room board games. What I hate in these escape room board games, besides the app integration, which is hit or miss, there's been some where it works really well, and there are some like this one where it just makes it's more annoying than helpful, or like, it basically triggers the wrong part of my brain. It just makes me go, shut up, instead of like, oh, I gotta listen to this.
Does it have those obtuse riddles? Oh, no. He jumped out of a plane, but the city was underwater, so he landed safely at the bottom, like...
Well, yeah, so it's like, without giving it away, some of the solutions are like a bit of a stretch. How am I supposed to put these three things together without a hint? The game punishes you for trying things and failing. And I understand they had to put something in there to like make you feel dumb, I guess. I don't know, in order to like feel better when you get it right. But it's like, if you just put like a random object together with another thing, and then you try and look at the number card that adds up to, it'll be like, you suck, take a minute off your time, loser. And you're like, okay, you know, so you're like disincentivized from just winging it.
Yeah.
But then sometimes the actual solution is like, oh, you need to like put the mouse in the hole. This is not a spoiler. Put the mouse in the hole and then put the bucket on top of the hole so that the mouse suffocates and dies or something. Like, it's like, you're just like, what? A little too obscure.
Like, for every person like us, there's somebody out there that's like, yeah, the latest Unlock game was not challenging enough. And meanwhile, we're just like, I don't understand. A, B, C, D, F? Like, what could go in between these? Like,
No, what's crazy, though, is like, I go to escape rooms. I've done a few in my life, and I've never had a problem with a real-life escape room. The last time I did an escape room, if you're really stuck, what they're supposed to do is they have a person that goes like, hey, guys, here's an idea. And they just announce something over a PA speaker, and you figure it out. If the person never has to do that, you're killing it, right? The last time I did an escape room, it was just me and Helena, and we got one hint. Like, we were overlooking something that blended in the scenery a little too well, right?
Yeah.
That's fine. I feel like I've never really struggled with real life escape rooms. I don't know if they're just better designed than these or what, but like, this is not the first Unlock game I've done, but every Unlock I've done has made me feel like a complete moron practically. But sometimes the puzzles are like really clever and I'm like, okay, you know, that was cool. We figured that one out. The game is definitely at its best when like secrets are being revealed because you're sliding cards around and it uncovers something. The clues are added together and it gives you a number. There are some riddles, though, that are just like obtuse. You're just like, how the fuck did they even come up with this? And then the thing I hate the most is they hide these little numbers in the art.
Oh, that's really annoying, yeah.
I hate that in these and any other escape room games that do that, because it's just like, why do I need like 40/20 vision? Like, my eyesight is fine. I don't wear glasses. And I like still, I don't know. It's just such a headache to try and find like a secret number that's just barely like visible because it's like, you know, it looks like the cracks in the floorboards. No, just give me the actual numbers. Make me have to like use tools or gadgetries. Their options are limited in Unlock because they don't give you a bunch of like toys and gadgets the way like Exit does, where it gives you all these extra things that you kind of put together and almost like craft. So I'll grant, like, it's probably a challenging design, but there are a lot of like negatives, I think, that I have with the Unlock series that make it very frustrating.
Yeah.
But did I like this one? Okay. But you know what? It's going to go in the C tier. It's right next to Monopoly for me with this one. Have you played Unlock? What do you think of these games overall?
I've never played an Unlock game. I did play an Exit game recently, and I had a really good time with it. There are 10 puzzles in an Exit game, and I think we got most of them, and the ones that we didn't, we were like, oh, that's really clever, and, you know, we just missed it. There was only one that really, we kind of threw our hands up, and we're like, well, there was no way we were getting that, and that's really dumb. But I'm willing to concede if 1 out of 10 puzzles is like that, like, I think that's a pretty good track record. I'm okay with that, especially if, like, the hints are clear about what you're supposed to do. There
was one puzzle in this Noside story I just had to look up the answer, and after knowing the answer, I'm like, what the how the fuck does that add up?
Yeah.
I still don't get it. So I'm stupid, I'll admit, but like, this is supposed to be like the lowest difficulty too. That's why I was playing it like with the kids.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's Unlock, a Noside story from 2018.
100 games to play before you die.
Okay, this is the part of the podcast for those who are new to the show where we talk about the 100 games that you're supposed to play before you turn 100 years old. And number 20 on this list is Flamme Rouge from 2016. Kenny, why is Flamme Rouge on the list? Am I pronouncing that right?
Yep. Flamme Rouge by Asger Granerud. This is Lautapelit, I guess distributed by Stronghold in the States. It's a racing game. It's a racing game about bicyclists. And your classic, you have people messing with the peloton and whether or not you can break away, or you're trying to stay with the group and get that wind resistance out of your face, all that. Most importantly, you're getting tired because biking is hard. Flamme Rouge, to be perfectly transparent, it's our racing game, but it's only our racing game because the other ones that would be in this spot have not been tested through time. So we'll see. We'll see in a couple years. Heat. Coincidentally, Flamme Rouge is the first iteration of Heat.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's the same designer, right?
Yeah, same designer, and there's a lot of mechanical overlap. This game is excellent, and the interesting thing is, like, I think there's like an expansion that came out for this recently, so they're still pushing forward with this game despite Heat having like this huge impact in the most recent years.
Do you feel like Heat or Flamme Rouge is like more approachable?
I think Flamme Rouge is a little bit simpler.
Okay.
There's like barely anything in Flamme Rouge. That being said, both of them are straightforward enough that if you don't add any modules, I think somebody that's relatively new could take on. There's something very visceral to racing games. I think people just like the idea of racing because it's very clear what your objective is. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's on the list, because there are some folks who that's all they do is play racing games.
I mean, it goes back like quite a ways, like Rabbit in the Hare, you know?
Yeah. Contenders for the spot, we have Formula Day. We have, I guess, Downforce. I think with something like Downforce or some of the betting games, we already have Camel Up, and I think that's a better spot for that. It's not about you executing first place. It's more about you hedging on who's gonna win. And then Formula Day is just a little bit too fiddly and random that I don't think that it's the best representation of what racing can be. A lot of people would argue that Formula Day is like their favorite game or like the best racing game or something like that. I just feel like Formula Day can really misfire.
You think it's just because like the output is too random? Because it's a dice rolling game.
It's not even the randomness. It's just like it can be a little overlong, and also like it gets more into the mechanics of the vehicle versus like you managing how much risk you're taking. Because Flamme Rouge does the same thing as Heat, where like you basically take on one movement cards the more you push yourself. So even if you're in the lead, you're going to start slowing down because you're exhausted. Basically, you've pushed yourself further. I think that's like the most interesting thing about racing games is like pushing yourself to the limit and seeing how that affects things. And Formula Day does that too, but it's like, oh, your car's falling apart and all this stuff. So a lot of people online have been saying this spot should be the Quest for El Dorado. And I'm like a hard disagree on this. And, you know, I'm a big Knizia fan. Quest for El Dorado's Reiner Knizia is considered one of his best. I think that El Dorado doesn't feel like a racing game. It's much more a deck building game than a racing game. And if you're going to have a deck building game on the list, I mean, this isn't a huge spoiler, but you're going to put Dominion on, in my opinion. So that's the only reason El Dorado doesn't make it on. I just don't feel like it represents either of the two things it's shooting for the best that it can on the list.
Well, and to be fair, Knizia is probably already a little overrepresented.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of Knizia already, so let's cool on the Knizia.
We can have -1 Knizia game to let some of these other designers, you know, be on the list. Yeah.
Exactly.
I actually want to play this because I like Heat, and I like the idea of playing a similar game with a different theme, honestly.
Yeah, and then the cool thing is you manage two racers at the same time, and they play together in an interesting way. So if you've ever wanted to play Heat but wanted more than one car, that's the other reason you could check this out.
Okay, there we go. Okay, well, enough of that bullshit, whatever the fuck you're fucking talking about, some French-ass game where you're on a bicycle through France, riding through fucking France, Amsterdam. So we're going to talk about the main idea. That's right. It's time. We finally do it. A deep dive. Everything you need to know about legendary game designer Carl the Tuckmaster Chudyk.
Carl Chudyk Tuckstravaganza.
And the only question I have for you, Kenny, is how many Carls could a Chudyk tuck Carl if a Chudyk could tuck Chuck?
2. Carl Chudyk was born on the planet Blorgon in 2005 in a stasis cell. They grew by placing cards underneath their feet and absorbing them until they were a fully humanoid being, and then completely nude teleported themselves to the United States, where they currently reside and build strange games. The end. Thanks for listening.
So basically, they're Superman.
Yeah, the Superman of game design.
Or maybe the Megamind.
I guess I've never really gone into why I think Carl is so alien-like.
I was just going to say, we jokingly describe him as an alien who came to Earth and designed games. It sounds mean in a sense, but we're not meaning it that way.
Oh,
like
it's
the guy
fully
is
a compliment.
You're right. He's thinking outside of the box in such a unique way that no one else is really quite doing it like him, except maybe Cole Wehrle. And so why does it feel so alien to play his games?
Yeah.
What's up with that?
Everything is broken, so nothing is broken. We were talking about import-export. Import-export attempts to be a Carl Chudyk game, but there's not that excitement, and part of the reason is because when you play a Carl Chudyk game, and I'm making generalizations, but you'll play a card and then the other person goes, no, there's no way that's what the card says. That's ridiculous. And then you hand them over the card and they look at it and they're like, okay, this game is going to fall apart. And then you keep playing the game and it doesn't fall apart. And so that's one of the big things with his games. The second thing is that everything is cards. The playmat is cards. Your units are cards. Your abilities are cards that tuck under other cards. We always joke about the tucking and talking about the tucking, but he really does love tucking his cards. And there's something to be appreciated about the minimalism of his designs. Games don't overstay their welcome. They're relatively lean in terms of the actual design. And then on the bad side, I think his games are very analysis paralysis prone. There's just so many things to think about because of the modular multi-use nature of things. And
right,
it's debatable whether or not this is a good or bad, but his games are very mean and unfair sometimes. There's a lot of take that. There's heavy interaction. And so if you want to just build your engine on your side here, get ready to get wrecked, because I don't think he has a single game that's really like, I can just do my thing and you do your thing over there. You basically have to involve yourself in others. And then lastly, his games are the ugliest shit on the market. If you're looking for pretty art, some of these games have no art.
Have you really answered the question though? Like, why is this man an alien?
He's very deliberate about the rules for his games, but the rules don't overlap with other games a lot. Like, he'll do things that other designers don't do, and you're kind of like, why didn't you do it this way? There's a lot of assumptions or affordances that people have about board games because of just playing them so much. A good example is like drawing cards in Matai and I. Like, you and I always are like, oh, okay, you like roll your eyes. You don't draw cards in Matai and I. You take cards from the deck and put them into a waiting area, and then all cards that are in the waiting area go into your hand after your turn is over. Functionally, basically, you can't use the card that you just drew. And that makes perfect sense, because then you could abuse certain things, like if you were able to just create an infinite loop where you use the card that you just drew to do the thing to draw more cards. You're just like, why do I not draw cards in this game? This is bizarre. Like, and you have to remind people, no, you don't draw cards. You place a card in the waiting area, and then all cards in the waiting area go into your hand. That's just one of many examples.
It's not really like that difficult of a concept overall to grok, but I agree. It's like, it's just enough that it makes you have to slow down basically and think differently. It challenges like the assumptions you had about how games are meant to function, right?
Yeah.
Because you play so many games, you just get to a point where a lot of things are just like, it's like secondhand. Imagine you're driving a car, if you drive automatic, for example, and you switch to manual.
Yeah.
You have
That's
like an entirely new, like thing you have to think about. That's what it kind of can feel like with his games.
Yep. Yeah, so let's jump into his most notable games. I want to differentiate between Asmati and non-Asmati games. So Carl Chudyk is very closely associated with Chris Cheslick's Asmati Games. It's a game production company, notably known for like One Deck Dungeon, amongst other things. They print a lot of his games that are considered the Carl Chudyk games. In addition to these Carl Chudyk games, Carl Chudyk has a bunch of garbo-ass terrible games that he's made that don't follow his quote-unquote philosophy. The only thing I can think of was that he was having an off day where he just wanted to print something, and or he was requested to design a game and was like, I guess I'll just give him this unfinished prototype. I'm talking about games like Bear Valley. Bear Valley is notoriously considered one of the worst games ever made. I don't know what Carl Chudyk was on when he made this game. And I read the rules and I was like, nah, I'm good.
That's rough to like not even have started the game, and from the rule book, you're like, I get it.
Yeah, this game is infamous. Like, it's considered the room of board games. And I can see why. So I want to be specific. When we're talking about Carl Chudyk games, we're talking about the ones that fit the description that I said earlier, that are typically published by Asmati and are considered the ones that he's actually put time and effort into, I guess. I don't know. I think I'm being insulting here. He would probably say, like, I put time and effort into all my games. It doesn't feel that way, I guess. Like,
it'd be so good to have him on the podcast. He's just like, yeah, Bear Valley.
It's my most proud account.
Yeah.
He's notoriously, he like keeps to himself, will not answer messages or be involved in any sort of other endeavors or media or anything like that, which I can respect. Probably not a guest on the podcast. The other thing that's commonly associated with Carl Chudyk is Cambridge Games Factory. Cambridge, Massachusetts, I believe Cambridge University, they had a group.
Isn't it Cambridge?
What did I say?
Cambridge?
Cambridge? Cambridge?
Cambridge. Like you came to the bridge.
Cambridge?
Cambridge.
Cambridge.
Yeah. Just go with it.
So, another commonly associated thing is Cambridge Games Factory.
I actually, maybe I'm fucking you up. Now I'm like second guessing. I have no idea.
I don't know.
Okay.
They sound the same to me. Cambridge University had, I think it's often associated with their math department, but had a group of folks who were super into board games and also were designing their own games. And then so Asmati came out of that. Carl Chudyk came out of that. A number of folks were part of that scene. It was like a collective of sorts. And so a lot of early games published by this Cambridge Games Factory, one of them being the first iteration of Glory to Rome, are associated with Carl Chudyk to a certain extent. How do you want to approach?
Name the game and I'll give you my impression of it.
Okay. Let me pop open his games. So first, we have one of his most iconic games, Glory to Rome. So we're not going to go into the full story of Glory to Rome here, but again, this is like the quintessential multi-use tucking game. This is a lot of people's favorite game of all time. It is also $300 to $1,000 if you want to purchase a version of the Black Box edition, because of the infamous story about how Carl Chudyk collaborated on this with Ed Carter, also of Cambridge Games Factory. Ed Carter was in over his head and basically committed to delivering something that is way too difficult to put out there. And only a small subset of this game's second edition were published. And now it's like a grail game that people try to go after. Carl Chudyk has kind of wiped his hands clean of this game. Basically said, I'm just going to riff on this. And that's how Matai and I came about. Glory to Rome, iconic. You played it recently for the first time, Tom. What's your take?
I take it over Monopoly.
Well, that is saying something. You know, you do love your Monopoly.
I do love it. It's an A-tier game. No, I played this having played Motainai before it. It was easy to understand because of its relationship with Motainai, very mechanically similar. I appreciate that a lot of the mechanics are like kind of more traditional, more straightforward than they are in Motainai. There's these jack cards, which allow you to basically take like a wild and manipulate your action selection options more readily. I really liked that about this compared to Motainai, where you just don't have that at all. And it makes me wonder why it's absent Motainai, which in a way makes me want to play Motainai more so I can understand it better. What's funny too is that after playing Glory to Rome, played Motainai the next day for a second.
You did?
And sort of. We didn't get very far before kids just needed too many things. But I understood Motainai better somehow because of Glory to Rome. I don't know how that makes any sense, really. Like, because when you break it down, it's just like if you understand the rules for one, you just would understand the rules in general. Somehow it just clarified things.
Yeah,
it's a clarified butter of board games.
Motainai was built upon Glory to Rome, so it makes sense that playing Glory to Rome would kind of help to scaffold into learning Motainai. And the more I play Glory to Rome, the more I'm like, this is the one I should be teaching people. I shouldn't throw people into the deep end with Motainai, even though I like Motainai more.
I think the thing about it is that the theme of Glory to Rome is more readily rockable than the Motainai theme.
Yeah, you're rebuilding Rome after the fires, and it feels like you're rebuilding it.
Yes, there's a lot of things are just under construction and it's happening over multiple turns, which is like what you would expect for construction to take. And then there's a vault, and then there's like a sort of a scrap yard. It's just like everything fits together very nicely in that thematic package. And then when you play like Motainai, having played Glory to Rome, you're like, okay, like this replaced the vault. It's sales now. You know, it just like, just somehow it just comes together better when you know what the original theme was, sadly. I guess that's like a little bit of a tragedy for Carl.
Yeah. So if somebody comes to you and is like, you want to play Rome or you want to play Motainai, what would you tell them?
I'm going to pick Motainai because there's more going on in Motainai that interests me. What I like about Motainai is the Highlander deck. Yeah. There's no repeat cards. There are repeat cards in Glory to Rome.
Yep.
Although, to be fair, we played 4-player Glory to Rome, and I guess 4-player Motainai would have repeat cards. So
that's true. You shuffle 2 decks together when you play more than 3.
And that's the other thing, too. I guess, like, Motainai, I'd want to play, like, in a head-to-head game.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd ever really care to play it at 3 or 4. Glory to Rome plays at 3 to 4 just fine.
Yeah, Glory to Rome plays well at a higher player count. Motainai, like you said, I pretty much want to play it head-to-head. I'll be okay playing it at 3, but absolutely nothing higher than that. It's just too chaotic.
Right.
Both are excellent games. I agree with you on every front. Like, I'd rather play Motainai. Glory to Rome is easier to understand. Player count, yeah. It really just comes down to if you have access to Glory to Rome or not. Because, like, that's the other thing. Like, Motainai is a $15 game, and you can get it pretty easily. Glory to Rome, you're either proxying it or you're paying out the wazoo.
It's funny that we're talking about Carl Chudyk, because when you first kind of told me about him, I was just like, who is that? What is Motainai? I've heard of this. I've always seen it. I don't know. And then it turns out that for a long time, I'd already owned a game that he made, which is Red 7.
Yeah, you want to talk about Red 7 next?
Yeah, so this is the 3rd highest ranked game when you look at Board Game Geek stats. I bought Red 7. I liked Red 7 for a long time because it has a sort of module style system for introducing people to the game. So there's like a really basic version of this that you can play. And then if you want, you can add complexity. I think there's 3 separate layers of complexity to this that you can sort of add in piece by piece as people become familiar with the game. So that was, I think, the first thing I really liked about it. And the second thing I like about it is that it is quick and light. And it's just like a neat, not exactly trick-taking, but
it's like Uno.
It kind of is.
It's a little bit like Uno, I feel like, but for smart people.
That's a good comparison. It's like if Uno was actually good. Yeah. And I really think like when you add the full complexity of the game, it becomes like truly I'm not sure if it's like actually deterministic. I think there's still just enough randomness that you're not like guaranteed to win, but you can like control the outcomes to a significant degree.
Yeah.
And that's what I've liked this game for a long time. It's just a neat puzzly filler game.
Yeah, I don't think we did a good job of describing Glory to Rome and Matainai for people who haven't played them, but at the same time, I don't even want to try to, because you kind of just try them. Like it's hard to describe. Red 7, I think we can do a better job of. So Red 7, like Uno, you're going around the table playing cards, but unlike Uno, you're trying to stay in the round by being able to win the game when it's your turn. That's the gimmick. Basically, you have to be the one that's winning at the table by the end of your turn. And you do so by either putting numbers in front of you or by changing the rule. There's a single rule at the center of the table. And so if you discard a card, you change the rule. And the rules are something like the person with the most 7s or the person with the most different colors. And as Tom alluded, there's also these additional rules that you can add on top of things that make it even more complicated. The game is fun because you can play it as a family game. But on top of that, you can add so many layers as to make it a more like traditional Carl Chudyk game. I like that. I like that it has like both options available. Shall we talk about innovation?
Yeah, what's innovation?
Innovation is Carl Chudyk's attempt at building a Civ game about all the technological innovations from the dawn of humanity to now, but in a very short, card-only, concise format. I think the only other game that's tried to do this is Through the Ages, and I would say that Through the Ages and Innovation are very different games. You either put a tech down or use the text that you already have, and the text can do crazy things. They can give you tags, and if you have the most tags, then you get to do more stuff. They also can make you splay your cards, which is basically reveal that they're all tucked one under each other. And that gives you access to tags from previous cards that you played. The way you win is by getting these achievements, and the achievements are very hard to get. So you have to basically get your civilization to a crazy state where it's starting to generate these huge point engines, or just breaking the game fundamentally. What did you think about Carl Chudyk's innovation, Tom?
I really like how this game encapsulates the ideas and the feeling of like one of these 4X kind of Civ engine builder style games, but it does it entirely through a deck of cards. There's just no extra components and kind of nothing goes to waste. I don't feel like I understand how to do well at this game even still. And a lot of it, I think, is kind of like odds management primarily, as far as I can tell, because you're kind of stuck with what you draw. And so you have to make the most out of that every turn.
I've heard people describe this game as very random or almost Flux-like, and I think that's kind of a misnomer.
Flux-like is rude.
Yeah, the more I play it, the more I'm like, no, there's a lot to think about here. There's a lot that comes with knowing especially the early ages and how they play, what the current flow is. Like, for example, there are certain cards that you just have to respect.
Right.
I'm thinking like mathematics, where you can just shoot up the age track. I think it's gunpowder, which just absolutely wrecks the early cards, the ones that have the castle symbol on them.
Right. Which is like a thematically cool thing, yeah. Yes. You've invented gunpowder, now you can just kill anything that like was dependent on swords or bows and arrows or whatever the hell.
Yeah. It is kind of amazing how thematic this game is, despite the art being literally just like a PowerPoint spreadsheet.
Yeah, it's like nearly non-existent.
This is a lot of people's favorite as well. I think if somebody knows Carl Chudyk and you ask him what is your favorite game, it's gonna be either Glory to Rome or Innovation.
It makes sense. I mean, this might almost be my favorite at the current moment. I like Motainai. I haven't played it enough to feel like I really like it. But I think like Innovation's the one that I'm most readily willing to play at this point. Because I think I understand how it works. It's got a bit of a rules overhead problem. But once everyone is familiar with the rules, there's not like a lot of downtime.
Yeah.
Which is nice for a game that is like trying to tell the story of civilization, right?
Yeah.
It probably suffers a little bit from Western imperialist bias, if I had to guess.
Yeah, I would agree.
I haven't really like examined it for that. So it doesn't fix those problems if you have an issue with that with these types of games. But like I'm saying, like it's interesting how it does sort of like the Sid Meier Civ themes and game style even, without feeling like it's just doing a colonialism, the board game again. You're not taking over territory. You're not controlling areas. You're not trying to rule the world. You're just sort of trying to reach the future before your opponents, roughly.
Yep.
But it's cool too in the great tradition of like Civilization, the true original Civilization. You have these multiple modes or methods of winning.
Yeah.
It's not exactly culture versus warfare, but similar idea.
It's interesting because subsequent games that Carl Chudyk made continue to explore the idea of like 4X in a small deck of cards, but like with very different approaches. So in 2013, he made Impulse, which is basically Eclipse in a deck of cards. I particularly like Impulse. It's kind of hard to get it to the table, but I like that it scales pretty well in terms of player count. That one does feel very random to me, but if you're okay with not winning or just, it being kind of arbitrary and just exploring how things evolve, I think it's a really fun one. We need to try that one together.
Well, I can't believe you never sold it to me.
I should have, because I know how much you like Eclipse.
If you'd said like it's Eclipse as a card game, I'm like, okay, we're talking.
You're laying out a hex board that is built out of the cards. And it also is much shorter than Eclipse. That's the other big thing. And then his most recent quote-unquote Chudyk game, AGNC, it's a game I've wanted to like, and I've tried many times to like it with another fellow Chudyk fan, and it just doesn't work. It's just sad. It's an area control game where you're trying to control the AGNC and its various islands. You're playing as the various Roman civilizations and doing this weird area control multi-use card thing. The problem I have with AGNC is that you use a card as its base action, and if you have the right conditions, you can do its fancier power. The problem is those conditions almost never happen. It's like if your shoelaces are untied on a Tuesday, then draw 2 cards. One of 2 things happens. You never use the text on cards, or you try way too hard to make the text on cards happen, and then it draws you a card. And you're like, why did I put all that effort into it? So I just feel like either the abilities should have been easier to fire, or they should have had a bigger benefit when they do trigger. After playing many, many games of this, I've just given up on it. I really like the core conceit and the mechanisms themselves. I just feel like in practice, it doesn't actually play out the way it
doesn't come together.
Maybe I'm just fundamentally playing the game wrong. And like, that's why I hold on to it. Because otherwise, like, I think this is a game I would get rid of. If it wasn't for Chudyk's name being on it and it feeling like the mechanisms themselves are good, I just feel like the card abilities really misfire. We kind of glossed over Motainai. Is there anything else you want to say about Motainai?
Motainai is the one that I think suffers the most from. It has these rules that aren't necessarily intuitive. There's a lot of what people could maybe describe as like fiddliness, almost like there's a lot of like lawyering.
Yes. It's the most alien-like.
Yeah. But once you have adjusted yourself to it being second nature, just like driving a stick shift, it comes together and flows. And you're like, why haven't I been driving manual this whole time?
Yeah, it's a very beautifully executed game. You have to like get there. And I'm not pretending that it's easy, but like you get there and you're like, this is beautiful.
It ends up being like surprisingly elegant. You really appreciate all of the thought that I think that went into just all the little steps. Everything feels like it's intentional. When you're first learning it, you're going to be like, did he really have to do it like this? Did he really have to do it like this? And then like, yeah, it comes together. Yeah,
every rule serves a purpose, which is amazing because like you said, the first time you play it, you're like, there's no reason to have that. But there is. Motainai is my favorite Carl Chudyk game. It is also one of my favorite games of all time, hands down.
Whoa.
It's just continued to go up and up every year, and it hasn't gone down, and now it's among the greats with Monopoly Deal.
Right up there with them.
That's it, right? Did we do all of them? Oh, we missed Flower Fall. do you want to...
Oh yeah, we gotta talk about Flower Fall.
It's alright.
It's a game.
It's a game. It's a really interesting concept. This idea of dexterity game, but via dropping cards from a height. I don't know that I've ever seen another game do that. For me, it's more like a thought experiment. You know what it reminds me of? It's like those 24-hour game jams. Like, I feel like this is a game that would come out of one of those.
I could see that.
It still feels very Chudyk-like, but yeah, it's definitely a more kid-friendly, this isn't serious kind of game.
Yeah, I had fun with this one, and I would readily compare it to like Rhino Hero. If you feel like you enjoy Rhino Hero and you want to play something like that's in a similar space, I don't know if it's as grabbing or as attention grabbing as Rhino Hero can be.
I agree.
And it's not as suspenseful, but it is about the same level of like hilarious. So
yeah, that was the first time playing it with kids recently. I think it does really well with a kid group. Like they were well into it.
It's funny, I guess. Like I didn't realize kind of how few games he's really put out.
He's done other ones, but again, they're not the Asmati ones. So
I think we need to try Sneeze. I really want to know Carl Chudyk's like bombs, because you were saying Bear Valley is notoriously shit, and it still has a higher average rating than Sneeze.
Oh, okay.
I'm very interested. I want to watch like the room of board games. That sounds fun to me.
Yeah. Maybe that's like a side project we do, is playing terrible games.
Yeah, play some ass games, bad games. What do you do with them? So bad they're good games, maybe. So Glory to Rome, Innovation, Red 7, Motainai. These are the ones I've played, and Flowerfall. Those are the ones I've played. And if you ask me which one I want to play the most right now, it's Motainai. Probably followed by Innovation, and then Red 7, and then Glory to Rome, and then Flowerfall.
Okay, yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, that's if you ask me to guess where you would put them, that's probably where I put them. For me, other than Motainai being at the top, I have a very normie listing of them. Like, I feel like most Carl Chudyk fans would agree. So I got Motainai at the top, then Innovation, then Glory to Rome, Impulse, Red 7, Flowerfall, and Agency. Yeah, Agency is just terrible. And I really wanted to like it.
I'll have to try this one out for myself, because I'm like, it can't be that bad, can it?
No, I mean, there's a reason that we didn't play this one in anticipation of this topic, because like I was just like, you don't need to. I want to spare you.
Yeah,
I mean, we can try it, but like, it's just not good. I don't know. There are people who swear that it gets better after 100 plays, so maybe we just got to play the 100.
People be saying that about a lot of things, though. Oh, bro, trust me. Once you develop Stockholm Syndrome, it's really good.
I will say this about AGNC. It makes you think. It's not one of those games you're like, this is just garbage. You're like, oh, this could have been so good. And even now, I'm like thinking about how the game works and how interesting it is. You know what it is? It's the Last Jedi of board games.
Whoa.
It's the Last Jedi of board games. Because you come out of it and you're like, well, at least it did something, and it misfired, but like, it's interesting.
Okay. Yeah. Like they could have just done the safe thing, which is what the fuck was that movie called?
The Force Awakens?
The Force Awakens. They could have just made The Force Awakens a straight up rip-off remake of the original, right? He could have just made another battle line, for example. But instead, he did something else. Yeah. Is that kind of what you're saying?
It's saying something that of all the games we're ranking, the one that is the lowest that I'm saying is a bad game is still an interesting thing to think about. That's just the kind of designer that Carl Chudyk is. I guess what we're saying is he's very fascinating. If you're familiar with Carl Chudyk, this is probably like a kind of podcast episode where you're just like, preach. But if you don't know who he is, hopefully we've gotten you interested at this point and you want to try some of his games.
It's almost like David Lynch. Everyone should watch a David Lynch movie to understand kind of what movies are capable of. And it's almost the same with Carl Chudyk. I think it makes it sound like Carl Chudyk's games are that unapproachable, and they're not compared to like if a person who's like new to movies, they're like, I love movies. It's just like, oh yeah, watch Eraserhead. Then tell me what you think. That is going to be a lot harder of an experience to survive than a Carl Chudyk game. But same vibe, roughly.
All right.
Yeah, I think that's going to do it for this week's episode. Thank you, everybody, for listening to our podcast. We appreciate you all coming back over and over again. And special thank you to Michael, Tyler, Devon, and Josh of the Boise RainBeaus. And another thank you to Bonehouse for letting us use your song Rot as our opening theme. We're going to be at SaltCon in Layton, Utah. The convention's from February 27th, which is a Thursday, to March 2nd. Our live show, so we're going to record an episode of this podcast in person. You're going to be able to ask us questions. We're going to be talking about what we've been playing at the con. You can play games with us at the con. But our show, it's going to start at 11 a.m. Mountain Time on March 1st. That's Saturday at SaltCon. So find us, follow us on Blue Sky for updates, and catch up with us. We'd love to play some games with our fans.
Yep. We're also going to be at Tree Fort, March 26th to 30th. We don't know which day, but that's the range. That is going to be free. So you don't need a Tree Fort wristband. You can just general admission, just hop right in. It's open to the public, open to children as well. So try not to cuss.
Right.
If you're loving the cast, share it with a friend or on Reddit or on BGG. It's the best thing you can do to help us grow. If you'd like to reach out to us directly, send us an email at shelfstablecast@gmail.com. All of this and more available in the show notes. Thomas, what do you want to do next week?
Next week, Kenny, I think we are going to talk about this hot new thing that Board Game Geek has put out, and that is the Board Game Geek Hall of Fame.
Ooh.
What's on the list? Why is it on the list? Do we think it deserves to be on the list? Do we need to stop talking about the 100 games that you made a list of and start talking about Board Game Geek's list?
You'll find out.
All these questions and more
on the next episode of Shelf Stable.
See you then.
Bye.